There's no, it's not. Oh, there it is.
There we go.
They see me talking. Thank you. If everyone could find a seat, we'll get started here in just a moment, and we'll reconvene the County Commission meeting. Welcome, everyone. To those of you who were here earlier this morning, and to those of you who are just joining us this afternoon, we're going to reconvene the County Commission meeting this afternoon for our public hearings. I'd like to have a motion, if I could, to accept proofs of publication.
So moved. Second.
There's a motion by Zembauer, a second by Delary. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. I'll go ahead and read our rules for public hearings. So just bear with me. For those of you that have heard it many, many times, check your email. And if you're new here with us today, this is how we're going to operate this afternoon's public hearings. Our staff is going to present each item for consideration with a staff recommendation, and the board will have an opportunity to ask questions of staff when presentations have finished. The applicant, which we don't have today, well, we have county staff as an applicant, so we'll call them as an applicant. We'll be making a presentation, and the board will have a chance to ask questions once the presenter has finished. Members of the public who are interested in speaking today, if you are here today to speak on a particular item, you have a way to do, two different ways to do it. If you want to actually speak and address the board, there are yellow forms out in the lobby that you would need to complete and submit to Ms. Kuntz up here at the front table. And if you have something you want the board to know, but you don't necessarily want to speak, there's a green form that you can fill out, and that will be passed down along the dais for each of the board members to read. We understand that not everybody feels comfortable getting up and speaking in public, but we definitely want to hear your input, so that is how you can do that today. Members of the public will only be allowed to give comment once per item. Speakers should state their name and address clearly for the record and whether you are for or against the item. You'll be given 3 minutes to speak unless you are the official spokesperson for an HOA or another legally organized group, and then you will be given 6 minutes, and that time is in lieu of other members of your organization speaking. If a board member has questions regarding the speaker's comments, an opportunity will be given once your time has expired. In accordance with the operating policies and procedures of the Seminole County Board of County Commissioners, Section 2.175, Public Participation Before the Board, speakers shall limit their comments to the subject being considered by the board. All comments shall avoid personal attacks, abusive language, and redundancy. Disrespectful, rude, irrelevant, or slanderous remarks or disruptive behavior may subject the individual to removal from the board chambers. The chairman may curtail repetitious comments. The clerk is with us today, and so if you have any items that you are planning to present to the board, the clerk is going to need a copy of that. So if you show it to us, be prepared to leave it with the clerk as a part of the official record. Once all speakers have been heard, there will be an opportunity for the board to have discussion. We'll close the public hearing, and the board, following a motion and a second, will have discussion and a vote. Commissioners who do not cast objecting votes are considered to have voted in support of the motion. Any questions?
No, ma'am.
All right. Our first item is the number 17, which is a resolution to adopt the 2023 non-ad valorem assessment roll. I have one written public comment form here that I'll pass down the dais. If there's anyone else here who would like to speak on that or make a comment about that, now would be the time to fill out the form. Be sure and get it down to Ms. Kuntz.
Madam Chair, point of personal privilege, please.
Sure.
I would like to take an opportunity to recognize and welcome Mr. Alex Bear, 9-year-old, who's in the audience today to see how government operates. Alex, welcome.
Welcome,
Hope you
Alex.
learned some things today. Thank you for being here and watching us go through the motions.
And don't learn.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Eason.
Good afternoon, Board of Commissioners. Chairman Lockhart, Michael Eason Jr. from the MSBU program. The purpose of this public hearing is to provide opportunity for public input prior to the board adopting and certifying the consolidated non-ad valorem assessment roll for tax year 2023. The assessment roll is a listing by parcel identification number of the assessments levied to fund public services that offer a special benefit to properties on a localized basis. The public services funded in Seminole County via non-ad valorem assessment include street lighting, residential solid waste management, lake management services, as well as certain capital-funded projects such as road paving, metered water service lines, and reconstruction of deteriorated neighborhood walls. Typically, these services are provided in response to property owner request. Given the localized benefit of these public services, assessment districts referred to as municipal service benefit units, or MSBUs, are created to facilitate funding these services. When an MSBU is created, assessments are levied against the benefited properties. The assessments are assigned on a unit of measure, such as per parcel or per dwelling. The 2023 non-ad valorem assessment roll, which consolidates the annual variable rate assessments and the capital assessment installment billings associated with all active MSBUs, is provided for your review and approval. The MSBUs for which 2023 assessments are levied were established previously by ordinances adopted at various public hearings. The 2023 assessment rates for MSBUs with variable rates were authorized by the board via Resolution 2023-R59 on June 13, 2023. As required by Florida statute, both published and mailed notice of this hearing were issued. The assessment roll presented today reflects the data mailed to property owners via NAVA notice on July 19, 2023. The final roll to be submitted to the tax collector by September 15th for inclusion on the 2023 property tax roll will include minor updates to accommodate property record changes initiated by the property appraiser's office and residential solid waste service option changes. Following public input, the requested board action is to adopt and provide certification of the 2023 consolidated non-ad valorem assessment roll. This does conclude my presentation.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Eason? No? Any members of the public who would like to speak, Ms. Coons?
Daniel Borden.
Mr. Borden? If you would, just come down and state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes. Are there any other speakers? No. You need to fill out a form if you'd like to speak on this topic.
Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Borden, Jr. I live at 2686 Hinoki Cypress Place, Sanford, Florida. I'm here just questioning the increase. I know everything's going up as usual, but just with the breakdown of everything and trying to understand how this cost is passed on to us as taxpayers, I feel that just in regards to looking at the numbers, that it shouldn't be going up, because I don't have the information to break down exactly the cost that is being passed on to the taxpayer, because in my neighborhood, there's been inconsistent pickups of yard waste, so I don't know how that gets passed back to us as taxpayers for missing probably a half a year of not being picked up with yard waste. So in just regards to that, I'd probably like to see a breakdown of the costs that are passed on to the taxpayer for this increase. And I think our hauler is Waste Pro, and I think that's what Seminole County uses for the whole entire county in regards to that and hauling our waste. So I am opposed to the increase because I would like to see the hard numbers as to why we are being passed on a 1.667% increase, which it probably should remain the same. Thank you.
Thank you so much for speaking. I think the county manager would probably like to address a couple of the items that were brought up.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you will, I can have our Mr. Edwards sitting in the back who's over our solid waste. I would like for him to offer his assistance to meet with him. He can go over his tax bill, and if you are having any issues with service delivery, we will definitely take care of that with our contractor. But I can have them speak and give him more information.
Yeah, and not to leave waste management out, but they do pick up too, so we can't blame it all on Waste Pro, but I hear you. Thank you very much for your input. I saw a hand raised with a green form.
In the yellow form. Is this only the current discussion?
Related to the MSBU, the non-ad valorem assessment roll.
Right, but I also have one for the lake management, not just waste.
Yes, it's everything related to MSBU. So if you have a street light, a lake management, garbage, come on up. This is for anything related to your non-ad valorem assessment. It's in the MSBU.
My question is regards to the lake management.
So we'll have you state your name and address for the record, and then if you would just wait one moment, because we need Ms. Kuntz to be paying attention so she can hit the clock.
Sounds good. All right, Tom Hoffman. I'm at 654 San Pablo in Castleberry.
Great, thank you very much.
All right. So my question is the lake management fees that are assessed to lakeshore homeowners residents. Our homeowners association actually owns the lake bed property and the shoreline. So I'm curious why homeowners that have residences on the lakefront pay any more than people across the street that don't have the lake view. Because we all own the same amount of the lake, which is none. The homeowners association owns the lake bed. So if we could address that at some point.
If you will. And I could have Mr. Edwards, or no, actually, Mr. Dredge could actually meet with him as well,
Okay.
too. So I don't know the particulars of that MSBU, but there is a boundary and the lots that were actually, that have voted to approve that. So I just would need to pull that out so I could
Okay.
look at that for you and we could share that information with you.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
Commissioner Zembauer may have a question for you before you go away.
And on that note, do you know who your lake liaison is?
That'd be Ron Shady.
Okay, and have you had discussions with that
I have
individual?
not. I just realized all of this in the last 3 days. So.
Because typically the liaison should be aware of how that structure was put together and so forth, but staff
He's
certainly...
on the homeowners board, so
Understood.
He knows that
Right.
the association actually owns that property.
No, understood, but that's typically our go-between communicator between
Sure.
all the residents and our staff.
Sure.
But our staff certainly
Yes,
can answer those questions as well.
And they'll meet with you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Any other forms filled out?
No, ma'am.
All right. Anyone who neglected to fill out a form who would like to speak on the non-ad valorem assessment roll? All right, we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, you've received some input. Staff is working on some items for some citizens, and we've passed down a written comment. Do we have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move to approve the resolution and adopt the 2023 non-ad valorem assessment roll with certification provided to the Seminole County Tax Collector.
There's a motion by Commissioner Zembauer.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Herr. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item number 18, Mr. Durr. And actually, before you start your presentation, I know there are quite a few folks here who are here for this item, so if you have a form that you would like to speak or you would like the board to see, now is the time to fill that form in. Don't wait until the last moment and then fill up and then run your form down the aisle. Now's the time.
Turn it in.
Turn it in. Don't have it sitting in your lap waiting.
And Mr. Humphreys, is yours in? Have you turned your form in to speak today? Just checking. Okay, great.
All right, Mr. Durr, thank you
All set.
for allowing me that time.
Thank you. For the record, Rick Durr, Leisure Services Director. Before we get started on the very brief presentation, I wanted to acknowledge the work of some of our staff on this that really did a lot of the heavy lifting in the County Attorney's Office. Gerlin Kahn has been absolutely indispensable through this process. Bill Pandos and his folks at Greenways and Natural Lands, Allegra Beyer, who's our Natural Lands Program Manager, Jim Doobie, who's retired, had a hand in this, and therefore, since he's not here, we can blame him for anything that goes wrong. And then Sherry Williams, our Special Program Manager, Special Projects Program Manager. So very briefly, I'm going to give once again, an overview of the history of this process, how we got to where we are today, some changes since the last time we were before you at the last work session, and then go through the final recommendation going forward. So going all the way back to last year, we firmly established that there was a need for additional funding for the Natural Lands Program. We are out of the money that came from the original bond funds, and that there continued to be at least the expression of a need for additional lands for acquisition. Again, going back to July 26th of 2022, by August, we had a staff team working together on drafting the original ordinance. Our new county manager came in right at the time came back to you on March the 14th. Between March and June, just to point out, is when we did the Yarborough application, and while that is not part of this application, it did allow us and staff to kind of ground truth some of the principles that we have in here that are modeled a little bit on the state Florida Forever program. Came back to you in June with some revisions, and then we're back here today with some additional revisions of the ordinance. The outline of the ordinance is broken up into 15 sections. It goes into detail, and while I'm not going to cover all the detail in each one of these, there's a 13 pages worth of detail in the ordinance. But it goes through the process of defining the program itself, a series of definitions, the use of an advisory board and how you would create that and how you would appoint folks to the advisory board. The role of the Leisure Services Department is serving as support for the activities of the ARC, their duties and how they would work with Leisure Services, the dedicated funding for Seminole Forever, the opportunity for additional partnerships and additional funding sources and their role in that, property eligible for acquisition and management, looking at different criteria and weighting criteria for acquisition, putting together a 5-year acquisition plan, the whole land selection process, and then really post-acquisition management activities and expectations of the board as set forth in the ordinance. So a couple of items that have changed since the last time we were before you back in June based upon your input. The first bullet point is in section 190.202. There was a new definition inserted in there for sustainable agriculture. There was a lot of discussion about what that might mean. So we've articulated that in the ordinance, as well as clarifying hunting uses on future program lands. You received an update from Mr. Chippock at the last meeting as well that really led towards the definition that's now in the ordinance. The second bullet point, 190.203, the use of an advisory board. There was some discussion about including some qualifications from our citizenry of the types of folks and their kinds of qualifications that you'd look for. So we've added a list. Certainly it's not a complete list, and it's not only limited to that list, but the idea of having folks that had a background in restoration biology and so forth. So you see the list up on the screen. That was added to the ordinance. The third point, and this is a new slide, so 190.206, the dedicated funding of Seminole Forever. I'll just read that sentence, actually two sentences. It used to be one single sentence in the ordinance, and after working with the Office of Management and Budget and Resource Management, making sure that it was really clear on whoever it was in the future that was going to need to do this calculation, that they really understood how to perform the calculation. So it basically reads now, the county shall allocate the equivalent of 6% of its general fund non-ad valorem revenues to Seminole Forever, period. A combination of other applicable funds may be applied to meet this obligation. And the final major change that was made is 190.209, criteria for selecting properties. This really described the idea of what we were discussing, the importance of water resources, whether the property is protecting or recharging groundwater, and so forth. So it really starts to lay out some specificity on the importance of adding water types of projects to the list for acquisition. So staff is recommending adoption of the Seminole Forever ordinance, and with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Jur. Commissioners, questions?
Not this time.
Commissioner Constantine?
Just real quickly, thank you. We talked about, kind of putting all the duties in one place, and I don't know if you had the opportunity to do that, or is that something that we wouldn't do at this meeting?
That's
For
something.
ARC.
For the yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. There was wanting to add to a certain.
The 5-year plan.
Correct, adding the 5-year plan to the list of duties and responsibilities of the ARC. Right now, there's a list. It doesn't include that. That's something I believe we can add in, correct?
What are we talking about?
You want to define just read the section where that is?
Yes.
It was just for clarification, we could definitely add it in. Commissioner Constantine brought this up to us last week, and since the ordinance was already out and publicized, I said we could talk about it at the meeting of adding that piece. It's just a clarification
Yeah,
piece.
it would be on page 6, section 190.205. It would be inserted in on line 149, which is currently blank, and it would be, if it's inserted, it would be item H, and it would list the need for the creation of a 5-year acquisition plan. Currently, there's a section that does describe the 5-year acquisition plan as a function of the ARC. This addition would just make it very, very clear, and it would all be in one spot.
Yeah.
And we're fine with that.
So are you doing page numbers on the strike ad or on the final version?
On the final version.
And members, it was just it is just something, all the other duties were delineated in other places and also put in this list. So it just, for continuity, it just putting it in under their responsibilities.
So for clarification, and Zembauer and then Delary, but this says that the ARC shall assist with, not be a responsibility of. And I think this board should be responsible for the 5-year plan. I don't think that I am not interpreting this to mean that we're delegating that responsibility to the ARC.
No.
Commissioner Zembauer?
Mine is along the same lines, that this board would make the ultimate decision based on the advice of the advisory board, and their purpose should be exactly that, like all our other boards, advisory in nature to us. And we would take their best work product and debate that among the five of us and make that decision. I know it's in here, but I just want to make it a statement for the record to ensure that we are aware that when these properties are considered, the costs for these properties include costs for remediation and any improvements on those lands that would be needed and should be considered as part of that purchase decision.
Yes.
It's not, I've talked to a lot of residents that believe that we're just going to go out on this whim and buy all these properties and just sit there and nothing's going to happen with them. It's pretty clear that our desire is to include the rehabilitation of any of these lands that would be considered, or any improvements, so the public could enjoy the lands. There's also a belief, and I've heard some people think, that we're just going to buy these lands and the public has no access to it at all. It's just going to be there, pristine, nobody touches it. The reality is the taxpayers are going to be paying for this and should have every right to access that in the format that our staff believes is appropriate for a given particular property.
Commissioner
Thank you.
Delary?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe H should be added so that there's full clarity, and I have no problem with them making recommendations to us, but there needs to be clarification so that everyone understands what the process is.
And
I think that's what you're trying to do, Lee, correct?
Commissioner Constantine?
yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm just
So let's
putting
just do
all
it.
of their duties, nothing they do is final. It all goes back to us. It's very clear every place, and this would be the same thing. Just as what Commissioner Zembauer has put it in is very clear that there are, that the public will have access in appropriate situations. Yes.
So I believe H needs to be added so that there's clarity. If we're discussing it here, that means there's not clarity.
Agreed, yeah. Any other questions for Mr. Durb? I have one. In going through the strike ad, there had been some language in a prior version that talked about availability of funds and our revenues not necessarily exceeding our costs in any given year. And so can you talk to me about how that change, and definitely Mr. Gray weigh in, how that impacts this board moving forward in overall budget conversations?
I mean, may need some assistance from Mr. Jex as well, as if we
Okay.
get into any kind of details. The gist of unless you want to handle
You can go
this.
ahead, I'll add in.
Would you like me to go ahead and ask Mr. Jex to come down?
So,
Yeah.
he's standing up. The current reading as it stands in this draft of the ordinance was scrubbed through to make sure that it was at least clear as to how the calculation would work, who was to do the calculation, and what's it a calculation of. So that last draft went through OMB. So
And if you will, I can just add some to that too. And we wanted to ensure that the ordinance had a dedicated funding source that was included in it, and so that's why it was struck through. So there will be a dedicated funding source for this program. As you all know, that there is a provision in there, if this ordinance needs to be amended at any point, that it could come back to this board, and we would notify any of you through the budget process if that was to occur. So the thought behind it was to have a dedicated funding source for Seminole Forever, what is reflected now.
Right, and that dedicated funding source is great when the funds are there, but what happens if they're not?
This is Timothy Jex. I'm the Budget Director with the Office of Management and Budget. The language that was put into the original ordinance that you mentioned was very restrictive. It basically didn't give a lot of flexibility. So if going into the process in an individual year, the expenditures were higher than the revenues, we would not be funding the ordinance. I think the way we're moving now, there's an allowance for a spend down, potentially using some reserves to fund the Seminole Forever transfer in the event that we had those reserves available. So I think this gives flexibility. The board does have the ability to change, to review on a year-to-year basis, but it doesn't restrict in the event that we did intend to spend down reserves, and it's for a small amount.
I'm bringing this up only because if we find ourselves in a situation, and those years happen, like 2004 as an example, where our reserves are, because of hurricanes, things are spent down, there will have to be some jockeying, we'll call it. And that's a funny pun because Mr. Gray is an equestrian, and so I kind of, but you didn't know that, so that wasn't funny to you, but it was funny to me. There's going to have to be some maneuvering in the budget department with the county manager to make that happen. And I think the fact that there would potentially be utilization of perhaps penny sales tax dollars in this next iteration to be able to help fund this really would take a lot of the pressure off of the non-ad valorem general fund.
Right, and we had talked about this internally as well, and since this is a new program, this is going to be a subject of when we go through our budget work session process with you all, that we will, if there is any type of jockeying or maneuvering, or that's the way where we would be presenting it to the board at that point.
Commissioner Herr and then Commissioner Zembauer.
Yeah, I just want to point out for clarification's sake, because we use terms relatively loosely with regard to reserves, and that always sends a shiver up my spine. It doesn't mean that if we have reserves, we're dipping into them if we don't meet the revenue need. It means that if we have reserves above the threshold with which we set as a minimum, that we dip into it. And I want to be super clear about that, because this isn't an opportunity to eat into reserves because we have a great opportunity before it develops and all of that good stuff that happens. Because we still have a county to run.
Right.
And we still have hurricanes that blow through and other emergency needs for reserves. So I just, for the record, want to be super clear that we're all nodding our heads in the same direction, which I'm not so sure we are. So
Yeah.
I'm actually going to ask that question down the dais.
It's a very good point of clarification. Commissioner.
Sorry.
That's okay. Commissioner Zembauer.
Thank you for covering that, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. The reality is, as I read through this and recognized the statements and changes that we've all recognized, the reality, I believe, is, and we have to have faith in our citizens that are here today, I do not believe, first of all, that the ordinance gives us the flexibility to change or modify at some later date in anticipation of something we're unaware of today. But I don't believe that a single citizen in the audience today is going to hold against us in a time of need that we retract from this program in order to keep streets open, water flowing, utilities running, et cetera, et cetera. I don't suspect any of them are going to hold us to a higher standard that we have to go find the money in those extreme circumstances. So I have no problem in proceeding with this ordinance as written.
Mr. Durr, any additional, or Mr. Gray, before we move to the public?
No, and just, again, just to add, that just gives us the flexibility, so we may not even have to go into, to reserves in that case. There may be another funding source or something, so that's what, as we talk about flexibility.
Commissioner Herr.
Well, and just as another point of clarification, somehow between the last iteration and this iteration, it moved back to 6%. We talked, it went down to 5, now it's back to 6, and it's fully funded, which I think, I'm not saying I'm not in favor of that before you all start sending emails to me right now. But this is a significant stake in the ground, and what that means for us is that we have to stop spending elsewhere. We maybe can't have an event center that's ginormous. Maybe we can't have, whatever it is we have. Tricia can probably, I see you put your head down immediately. There was body language there, Ms. Johnson. The long list of wishes that we all have, the next golf course, the next whatever. This is roughly $3.5 to $4 million off the top line every year, and that's not going to be enough to acquire land, because the first acquisition you make is going to have a maintenance requirement that goes along with it, and that scrapes out of the acquisition opportunity. The maintenance doesn't get put elsewhere.
Right.
It's in this number. So I just want to be very, very clear around the idea of what we're doing here and what our intentions are here.
Well said. I concur with everything that was just said. Anything else before? Okay. How many folks do we have from the public that have asked to speak? And and I've got the green forms. Okay.
We have quite a few.
Okay.
If you'd like to start with.
Well, I'd like to know how many, because that tells me how much time I'm going to allot.
Opposition and 15, 20 in support.
Okay.
Is it 15
so
or 20?
I'll count them all.
So here's what we're going to do.
I can count the first one up.
We're going to give an hour for public comment, and so if you don't use all of your 3 minutes, that's great. That means that someone else can have all of theirs. If there are more than 20 people who would like to speak, talk quickly, and we'll hear an hour's worth of comments. Thank you again for the written comment forms.
Madam Chair, and I was just going to say, and if any of you feel that you don't need to speak, you can wave in support of those people if you feel comfortable in that too.
So we'll have the person who would like to speak in opposition first.
Bill Hyde.
Mr. Hyde. And then after Mr. Hyde, what we'll do is, if you all wouldn't mind, Ms. Kuntz will call up 3 names at a time, and then we can just have a nice little line going along that wall so that there's not a whole lot of time wasted in between speakers, because we want to make sure everyone does get an opportunity to speak that would like to. Mr. Hyde, name and general address for the record, because you may not want to say it out loud.
Are you kidding? My name is Bill Hyde. I live at 2379 Audley Street in Oviedo. It's clear to anyone within the sound of my voice that this is designed to protect the lifestyle of some here in Seminole County, but at the expense of others. Taxpayers of parts of the county that are more centralized, especially those near UCF, have been unwillingly urbanized by development over their objections. That you cannot argue. So where was the clamor for buyouts then? What's different about today? Well, I'm very glad that Mr. Durr identified the invisible element in the room, the Yarborough property. Let's face it, that's what triggered this whole thing. We've got to be honest, don't we? So I looked through the numbers. It says here that there would be no direct economic impact at this time, but it also says that $3.4 million would be transferred the first year. And I looked at the ad valorem for 2023, and it seems the proposed millage would generate dollars much higher than the current rate of inflation. That means that instead of our commission returning to some kind of a rollback and giving property owners a break, the slush would go into buying and taking private property off the tax rolls, which increases the burden on those of us who actually pay the tax. So I have an advisory board, and it's always good to have a committee to hang the decisions on. And it's not hard to figure out how this is going to be made up. I read through it. It does say citizens, but it doesn't specify you have to be a Seminole County citizen. And then not one mention of a taxpayer. Selection calls for experts in biology, forestry, and so on and so forth, but it doesn't say that anybody has to have a degree in those fields. And I would like to take a bet that there may be members of this board who will pay no property taxes. Additionally, the ex officio members listed here have vested interests with obvious influences. Sure, the paper says they have no voting rights, but we know how that works. It will be pressure. Just look at the horsepower behind the names that y'all have listed on there. Okay, so Forever Seminole has been promulgated and massaged quietly from Sanford to Tallahassee because you got to connect some more parts to get this money. I have not lobbied, met with, or contacted any commissioner or state rep in any way on this. But there is a whole bunch of people that are going to be coming up here, and I bet you $1 that somebody who has been coming to these private meetings is going to be looking for an appointment. I haven't done that. If nominated, I will not accept. Trust me. Okay, I know discretion is a better part of valor. I have no discretion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hyde. For our first three, second, third, and
Yes.
fourth speakers.
Charles Honaker, Pete Buez, and Charles Lee.
All right. If-
Hey, good afternoon, Commissioners. Charles Honaker. I'm here in place of Phyllis.
I'm going to ask you to wait for just one moment.
Address?
Well, we need your name and address, and then we need to reset the clock to 3 minutes because we don't want to give you just 8 seconds.
That's a good rodeo ride
Do your
there.
name, I'll start it with
Yeah, Charles Honaker, 220 Shady Oak Circle, Lake Mary. I'm here standing in for Phyllis Hall with Seminole Audubon Society. So I'm happy to be here. You know, look, I was sitting back there looking at Seminole County, Florida's natural choice. I've lived here since 1989, and we've made a lot of choices. Sometimes they're not all natural. But at Seminole Audubon, we've done a lot of work. There's people in the room here with me as well who appreciate the natural lands we have. So I'm here in support of the ordinance. Part of our role with Audubon is connecting people with nature. And in the last few years, there's been a lot of opportunity to see people out enjoying the natural lands we do have in Seminole County. So just to reiterate in favor of this ordinance, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to come speak with you. My name is Pete Buis, 5376 Ohio Avenue. I'm in the Sanford Farms Northwest corner of Seminole County. Commissioner Zembauer probably remembers me as the gentleman goat farmer from other meetings, but in any event,
Amen.
I had an extensive conversation past week with Commissioner Constantine in regards to this issue, and fully for it. But now, after hearing some of these other things, I'm starting to scratch my head. And Commissioner, here you brought up, you may have to make a choice of what we're going to do. I think this is a great idea. But as a retired individual on a fixed income, I don't need any more taxes. I mean, we've got what we've got, but maybe we don't need a bicycle path around the county. We need this water conservation more than that. And if that is, in fact, where y'all are going with this, as I shared with Commissioner Constantine, I'm fully for this. And if that is the fact, if you can tell me that, I support and would hope that you would vote in favor of this.
Great. Thank you very
Okay?
much.
Thank you.
Mr. Lee, if you would come up, and Ms. Coons, if you would tell us who our next three are.
Christopher Stevens, David Bear, Francis Neville,
Neville, yeah.
Madam Chairman, members of the Commission, Charles Lee, Director of Advocacy of Audubon, Florida. You know, as we work around the state with conservation properties that are in line for potential acquisition, one of the things that comes clear to us is that those counties that have a local land acquisition program to use in partnership with the state agencies are counties that move further and faster in the acquisition process than those counties that don't. And you can see this from one end of the state to the other. And even if the aggregate amount that the county can chip in to a match is not large, the psychological effect that that has in Tallahassee is large. And that's the point. And it's very clear this is not a dip into ad valorem taxation. This is non-ad valorem sources. I think that the flexibility that this ordinance as written today has is flexibility that keeps you out of trouble and keeps your options open. And that's all good. And so we would urge you to follow the advice of your county administrator and others who have spoken here today from the county staff, and to give this a yes vote, which we would hope would be unanimous today. It's a good program. It's conservative. It's a step in the right direction. It doesn't go over the top, and it retains your flexibility. All of those are good things, and I know this will have a very strong positive reflection on more acquisition by the state in Seminole County. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you would call the names again for us so we know what order.
Christopher Stevens,
Right, Mr. Stevens, and then it was Ms. Neville, and then Mr.
David Bear, and then Ms. Neville.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Stevens, if you would, state your name and address for the record.
Christopher Stevens, 286 West 2nd Street in Julietta. This is my first time at one of these meetings, so
Welcome.
a little nervous.
We don't bite.
Welcome.
I came here today really to, I looked over the proposed ordinance and really like the idea of it and everything. I just wanted to share some of my observances. Seminole County being the fourth most densely populated county in Florida, as more people move to our beautiful corner of the state, many of them will want places nearby that offer passive outdoor recreation. And our wilderness areas are sort of a straightforward way for the county to provide these services to our citizens. In 2020, there was a 600% increase in the use of our natural lands in Seminole County for obvious reasons. These properties continue to still have these much higher visitation than ever before. Currently, the county has 8 wilderness areas and 1 preserve with public access, with natural areas making up over 6,600 acres of conserved land, owing to some great conservation programs that the county has put on in the past twice that have created these really great wilderness areas. The parking lots are always full at the Black Bear and Econ wilderness areas, and residents and visitors to our county regularly enjoy immersing themselves in Florida's iconic natural habitats that are home to unique and threatened and endangered species. The time to act for preservation is now. Once the land has been developed or converted to pasture, it will never be the same. It is also incredibly important to protect our surrounding ecosystems because we rely heavily on their health. In particular, the water in our aquifers is a limited resource that needs unpaved land and pollution filtering wetlands to recharge. Having more locations throughout the county to recharge would be a huge benefit. I found that the Acquisition and Restoration Committee in the proposed ordinance was, I thought, to be an excellent idea. Setting up a board of volunteers to coordinate ideas at no additional cost to the county. One of the biggest upsides to having a program like this is often once a county can put up funds, it opens the door to getting additional funding from other agencies and conservation lands, such as the state and other conservation trusts. And I think Seminole County would almost certainly have support from the community, helping to keep these properties clean and participating in trail maintenance. I spend a lot of time traveling around the state. I write, I hike and then write about it for a living. And I've really seen some of these other places in the around the state. One that really sticks out with me is Hillsborough County Natural Lands that I spend a lot of time. They have 28, sorry. They have 28 nature preserves there. Those are part of their Environmental Lands Acquisition and Protection Program, and it has a huge amount of citizen support with many volunteers dedicating time and energy to the project. And I think that you'd have the same sort of response with the community here.
Thank you very much.
Who's next? Oh, that's all right.
I misspoke, Francis, my apologies. Mr. Bear? Both Mr. Bears?
Yes.
This is Alexander Bear, my oldest, happy to be here and, give him an opportunity to see how local government works. Thank you, and Mr. Zembauer.
Absolutely.
So again, my name is David Bear, live in 921 Tuscaloosa Trail, Winter Springs. I'm the president of Lake Tuscaloosa Association. I am the president of Save Rural Seminole. I'm not speaking as my role as the president of Save Rural Seminole, so I don't prejudice anybody else's ability who happens to be a member of the organization who wants to speak as well. This is a great opportunity to leverage our county's money, to leverage the resources that our county and the residents have. You heard Mr. Lee speak about that, a foremost expert across the state of what actually happens when a county is the ability to be a partner to statewide organizations. He's not just speaking esoterically, he knows, firsthand experience. We can convert $100 into $200 of buying power if we only have the $100 there. It's a shame and a waste to not be ready to take advantage of that, and we're not. There was some semi-aspersions cast before about the origins of this. I know what the origins of this were. It was not a specific property. It was to be able to do just that. The county was not able to do that as it had been in the past. That was a serious problem for those of us who love the natural resource of our county. That was the goal, is to be able to acquire lands, leverage our power. It's been about a year since we were here on the proposed natural lands referendum. Seminole Forever came to being as an alternative to that. Each of you has expressed an interest and desire to be a part of Seminole Forever, whether that was on campaign, whether that's on prior meetings we've had here. Everybody's expressed, all 5 of you have expressed an interest in being a part of that. We've been here through many meetings over many months. The ordinance has gone back for revisions with lots of feedback from individuals, and that feedback has been taken into consideration in a very admirable way. I've read those prior iterations, and I've read this one. And everybody knows the phrase, the perfect is not the enemy of the good. This is not just good, it's very, very good. It is an excellent ordinance and an excellent program as it stands here today. It would be a waste and it'd be a shame to not move on this now. It's been a long time. It's ready to go. It's time to do it. The community is excited about this, and this isn't just one meeting. You've seen lots of people here. Many meetings, you've seen lots of people here. I'm sure you've all gotten lots of feedback as well. And it's not just our citizens who are excited about this. Other counties, other municipalities are excited to follow our lead and do similar things, which is not just raise money, but as you heard from the very beginning of the meeting, from the very beginning of this ordinance's origin, this is about embedding in local government a principle that we care about this. We care about roads, we care about infrastructures. We as a county also care about this. It's a priority. So that's the point of embedding it in the ordinance the way it is. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Neville, my apologies. Who are our next three?
Next three are Gabby Milch, Nancy Prime, and Paul Owens.
Thank you, Chair Lockhart, and thank you, Commissioners. And I just want to say to Mr. Bear, I'm glad you brought your son, because I think it's symbolic to have a young person here as we talk about conserving land for future generations. I'm Frances Neville. I'm the Director of External Affairs and Strategic Communications for Conservation Florida. We're a statewide land conservancy, and we work to protect Florida's wild and working lands, agricultural lands as well, to connect the Florida Wildlife Corridor. Our CEO, Tracy Dean, has had the privilege to discuss with many of you and your staff and partners over the last several months as your teams have contemplated ways to protect Seminole County's wildlands. We are very supportive of your efforts to ensure that conservation is valued and prioritized. We remain committed to partnering with you as a trusted resource in the months to come as you work to ensure that Seminole County's natural resources are protected for generations to come. Again, we commend your leadership and look forward to working alongside you now and into the future as you conserve Seminole County's special places. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Neville. If anyone has a cell phone close to a microphone, we need to remove it. Okay. Ms. Milch, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Gabrielle Milch. I live at 252 Coble Drive in Longwood, Florida, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all today for having this ordinance available for us, and please support it for future generations. Seminole Forever Land acquisition is a great and everlasting gift to the citizens, and please, the effects it will have on our Seminole citizens as well as visitors from all over the world come here. I've seen people, different license tags at the Black Bear Wilderness Preserve and all the other wonderful features that we have in existence. And I hope that I know that some people aren't in favor of spending money when there's an emergency going on, and that should be the way it is in the world. And the opportunity to buy land is not very easy with the development coming through here, and we need spaces for people to get out away from the city, the hard pavements, the heat. You can go into the forest and it's much cooler there, if you just need a break from all of the things. A maintenance plan, of course, is really important, and having funding for that maintenance and acquisition of the different activities that you're going to provide, planning for a civic center and a place to meet. I mean, there's gazebos and places people can meet outside in the proper weather and such. And, as far as a tax burden on the society, there's always, places to spend money. So I just want to encourage you all to please, go forward with this today, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Ms. Prine?
Good afternoon. My name is Nancy Prine. My address is 655 Terrace Boulevard in Orlando. I am a longtime member of Friends of the Wekiva, and I chair the Wekiva Wild and Scenic River System Management Committee. I would like to compliment this board for coming forward with this proposal. I was really proud of Orange County when they said they wanted to spend $100 million on natural lands. But this program means that you can continue to have the resource to buy those lands. And I would like to remind you of one thing. We've been talking about recreation today, but the real thing that open lands, natural lands do is it assures water. It assures that we have a protection from flooding. And it means that we today can have friends and relatives who live in Central Florida be able to continue to live here because we're protecting those resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Mr. Owens? And who are the next three?
Mark Pafford, James Helmers, and Joe Humphreys.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Hello again. I'm Paul Owens, president of 1,000 Friends of Florida, which counts scores of contributors and followers here in Seminole County. We're a statewide nonprofit dedicated to smart growth and conservation. We're based in Tallahassee. I live in Orlando. I'm back for the fourth and hopefully last time to urge you to establish the Seminole Forever Land Conservation Program in the county's budget. After I had testified before you the last time on this issue in June, I went to an event in July in Winter Haven, organized by Ms. Neville's organization, Conservation Florida, that highlighted Polk County's commitment to land conservation. And it was a packed house. You might recall that Polk County was one of 8 counties in November where voters chose to pay higher taxes to create or renew a local land conservation program. With those votes for conservation, those 8 counties moved to the front of the line for leveraging matching dollars from state, federal, and private sources. If Seminole doesn't fund its own conservation program, it'll go to the back of the line. There's a lot of money at stake. The last time I spoke to you, I mentioned the legislature and the governor guaranteeing at least $100 million a year to the Florida Forever program, the program that could provide critical matching funds to protect environmentally valuable land threatened by development. Now Congress is working on the latest version of the federal farm bill, and it could include $20 billion to preserve agricultural land across the nation. To take full advantage of such golden opportunities to qualify for these funding sources, Seminole needs to have its own land conservation program to keep up with the competition. Seminole's in a unique position. By approving the Seminole Forever proposal, you can establish a new paradigm where protecting land and protecting water is a basic responsibility of local government that belongs in the budget every year. It wouldn't have to depend on the periodic willingness of county voters to pass an additional tax on themselves. And the inclusion of the supermajority requirement for any changes in the ordinance gives us additional confidence in it. Finally, I'd urge you not to further delay this commitment. Florida and Seminole County are growing too fast, and there are too many environmentally valuable properties at risk to put this off any longer. There is a wave of support for conservation across Florida. Seminole needs to catch the wave.
It is afternoon. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My name is Mark Pafford. I'm Friends of the Wekiva River. I'm here in support of the Seminole Forever ordinance. South Florida, that's unfortunately where I'm from. I'm moving north every decade or so. Had something called Browardization for a long time. Dade and Broward and now Palm Beach have basically suffered build-out with very little effort to preserve and conserve those areas of importance, whether it was mentioned earlier, water quality, just having those lands available. And honestly, the sciences really weren't developing at that time during the 60s and 70s. Now, we really have no excuse. Seminole County is a leader among counties in Florida. This action is critically important for conservation and preservation of land and water, including the Wekiva River protection areas. As a former legislator, I can tell you that the Florida Forever program will never have the amount of dollars required to purchase every priority throughout the state. It's just not possible. And so by Seminole having taken this action on their own, I think it really adds quite a bit of your credibility when it comes to being Florida's natural choice. I knew about Seminole living in South Florida. It's a well-known tagline, and perhaps being here, you don't always know that. It sells travel to your county to see things like bears and woodpeckers, of all things. On behalf of the Friends of the Wekiva River, we thank you for your efforts on your work and something so important and, more importantly, timely. Thank you.
I, too, am a Broward County refugee, Mr. Pafford, so I understand.
Good, thank you. I'm glad it wasn't in a vacuum.
Same.
Hello, I'm Jim Helmers, 104 Elderberry Lane, Longwood. Our natural lands have an unbelievable recovery ability after stress and degradation. There's nothing that we can do the most important thing we can do is to keep our natural lands, water, and air intact, or at least give them enough space to recover after the degradation that we are constantly placing onto our natural resources. And I don't think there's anything more beneficial for the health and welfare of the citizens of Seminole County and our state and our world than healthy air, water, and land. So I'm obviously in support of this Seminole Forever proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Humphreys, as you make your way up, I'll ask Ms. Coons to call out the next three.
We'll do 4. It's the last 4.
Okay.
Cindy Holler, Fred Milch, Richard Creedon, and Virginia Creedon.
Good afternoon, all. Joe Humphreys, 883 Cardinal Point Cove, Sanford, Florida. Yes, I'm here representing my HOA, of which I'm now the president of, but in an effort to shock Mr. Zembauer, I'm not going to ask for 6 minutes. So I'm hoping to squeeze my comments into that time period. I agree with everything that you heard so far, up to and including my friend Bill Hyde. Like Bill, I'm concerned about overspending as well. The commissioner, talked about budgeting and reserves. I'm dealing with those issues as we speak. I'm looking at reserves and trying to maintain retention ponds, which I'm legally obligated to do for the next 10, 15, 20 years. County has a lot of retention ponds we need to think about. You heard about our population. That's it. We're number 3. We're 64th, as you heard, in acreage, but we're 3rd most dense. Most people don't know that, and it's increasing. We know that Florida is the fastest growing state in the nation at this point, and a lot of those people are coming here. So we know about water and soil and all this kind of stuff, and again, in deference to my friend Bill, this didn't just start because of Yarborough or just recently. This whole process began in 1990, when the citizens of this county voted to tax themselves to acquire properties to the tune of $20 million. And then 10 years later, they added another $5 million. I can tell you that most of the people live in my community and around Lake Markham, who I know a lot of, they're here because of that. That's a priority. This county, through all the documents, I've spent years going through the history of the county documents. That's a commitment. So we can talk about what our priorities are. That's the priority. Because the people in this room sit here and they look at that every time we come to these meetings. So we expect this commission, as we expected previous commissions, and I commend staff and all of you for putting the effort into this that you have. But this is also about finances as well. And I'll share this and I'll pass this in when I'm done, but this, and Andrea can relate to this, is how much value does the city of Philadelphia receive from its park and recreation system? The savings, the monies generated from taxes is huge. It's documentable. We can work with organizations like the Trust for Public Lands, which I've been involved with for a number of years. So yes, as David said, there are lots of opportunities to leverage this. So thank you for pushing this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humphreys. Ms. Holler, I believe you're next, and
Fred Milch is after her.
and then Mr. Milch. Okay. And Mr. Humphreys, be sure to turn in that paper if you haven't already.
Oh, sorry. Oops.
Kyla got it? Okay.
Okay, pull myself together here. Okay. Cindy Holler, 1731 Beacon Drive, Sanford. My comments are short because a lot of people took my thunder, but that's okay. So I am here to support Seminole Forever. Land conservation program like this, I believe, supports our governor's order 2306 to protect our natural resources. As has been said, but I think it bears saying again, less water problems, the more natural land we have preserved. So less flooding, I heard that talked about. We do have heavy rains and hurricanes, as we all are aware. Seminole County, Florida's natural choice. Let's put our money where our motto is. And this is very good. Let's do it today. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Milch.
Good afternoon. I'm Fred Milch. I live at 252 Coble Drive in Longwood, Florida. I have to tell you, I'm really proud of my county commissioners. I haven't said that before, but I think this is a really good ordinance that you're about to pass. It's magnificent and everlasting, I think, are good descriptors for it. We need these areas for people. The comprehensive plan is allowing for more densities because we're running out of land, so it's a lot of competition between development and conservation. We need this both for visitors as well as residents. Ecotourism brings in a lot of money to Seminole County. I'm an ambassador or a volunteer for Audubon, and on some weekends I greet people at the North Apopka Lake Drive, which I hope you've all driven through that. A lot of birds, and I greet people and ask them questions, and it's amazing how many people are from out of state and out of country. Last weekend, or last time I went, there was several from England, Poland, Australia, Canada. It just goes on, and I'm surprised by how many foreigners that are here. They come to Disney, and they also read about this as another thing to do. And I think Seminole County can take advantage of that. The only thing I would like is for you to allow for increasing funding for this, so you can even match more things to it, get more matching funds for it. And I think you guys should get a plaque for this. I think that the first place that you buy it should be the Lockhair Doll ZemCon greatest ordinance ever. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Fred.
Fred, you can come to our meetings anytime.
That's all right.
We had a couple more speakers, did we not?
The Credens.
Oh,
Virginia and Richard Creedon.
yes.
Support the ordinance and would like to waive our speaking time.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Creedon. So for the record, in case that wasn't picked up, the Creedons are waiving their time to speak in support of the ordinance. Okay. If there was anyone else who wanted to speak, because we do have 30 minutes left, you all did an amazing job getting
Fantastic.
all of your input in a really efficient manner. So thank you on behalf of all of us. Is there anyone who neglected to put in a form who would like to speak, since we have some time left? Okay. Do you really need? Yeah, okay. Okay. If you would like to speak, this is it. We aren't talking about this again. This is your time.
And can you fill out a form?
Yeah, you'll need to fill out a form before you leave the area.
Yes.
Yes, if you would state your name and address for the record.
I'm Leslie Grubel. I'm from 1841 Misty Morn Place, Longwood, Florida. First of all, I would like to thank Commissioner Constantine for coming to the League of Women Voters and speaking to us and explaining this wonderful process that you've got going on, and for this wonderful idea. We appreciate that. I cannot speak generally for the League itself. I am wearing that badge. But I will speak for myself as an individual. And I will say that I've lived in Florida now for over 35 years. I'm a 75-year-old woman who really enjoys kayaking. And I have loved going down the Wekiva River. It's a long trip, but it is well worth it. To have more of those kinds of things in our area will bring many people who will enjoy this country like this in our state. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And for the record, we cannot create a Wekiva River out of this program, but you're welcome to paddle down it as much as you would love to.
Conservation areas.
All right, thank you very much. Your name and address for the record, and we'll make sure and get all those forms before you all leave.
My name is Pat Burkett. I have been involved with Florida's Natural Choice since 1970, when I was involved with the League of Women Voters, and we passed the Parks Amendment. 70% of the people voted for that. And then I was on the Parks Committee buying the parks. And then I was on the Natural Lands Committee buying natural lands. and the Greenways and Trails Committee, all of these buttons I got here. I just wanted to say that this has been a lifetime work for me, and it should be a lifetime work for you. It should be a lifetime work for everybody who lives and loves Seminole County. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for getting this going. Thank you.
And I'll also say, Pat, you neglected to say that you were instrumental in the Environmental Studies Center for Seminole County Public Schools.
I started the Environmental Studies Center. That's right.
The mud walk, for anyone who's done the mud walk.
Anybody done the mud walk?
Yeah.
Oh,
That's me. That's me.
I've cleaned up a couple kids over that.
What'd you say?
I said I've had to clean a couple of young'uns over that one.
Yep. Best day of a kid's life. Okay.
Chaperone the wet day and the dry day, back to back. Let me tell you what that's like. Yes, sir.
So he is item number 17.
Oh,
If I failed to, so
my apologies.
No, it's no problem. My name's Tyler O'Donnell, 602 Grand Cypress Point, Lake Sylvan.
Okay.
So,
The non-ad valorem assessment role. Yeah.
Who comes up with this? Who comes up with $600? Who? Is it you? You? Which one of you
So,
guys?
sir, since we have moved on to this topic, what we'll
Well,
do
no,
is we'll hold your public...
Excuse me.
No.
I was first out of the gate, but I got skipped.
Okay.
So,
I apologize for that, but we will definitely take up your issue. But we're going to go ahead and finish this public comment because it's on this topic. So we're going to stay on this topic, and then the commissioners will vote on this, and then we'll be happy to take up your issue. So I apologize that that happened, but if we take your public comment now in the middle of this, it won't work for our minute taking and all of the other information.
working for me, that you're not working for me.
I apologize.
I'm asking you,
You may have
who
a
comes up with a number?
You may have a seat, and we'll take it up when we're finished with this item. Thank you. Any other public comment on this item? All right. Thank you all so much. We'll close public comment on this item.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Sembauer, I know Commissioner Herr had actually asked to be recognized, but
Okay.
do you have a comment, or are you going to jump in with a motion?
Oh,
Because that's what you do sometimes, so I don't know what it is
well, you know,
you're
I'm all
doing.
about getting things done.
I know,
So if
but
Commissioner Herr wants to
Well,
make that
I'm-
motion, I'm fine.
I'm not about getting stuff done at all, just, I don't know what that insinuation was, but
It wasn't an
I
insinuation.
actually listened to the public comment and want to bring up a couple items. I do think that it doesn't say it should be a Seminole resident on this board, and I do think that is a really important point, because it's only 7 seats on this board. And so we could fill these seats with non-residents. Now, where I think I am asking my fellow commissioners to write in Seminole resident. I will not take up the cause of a taxpayer versus a non-taxpayer, because the insinuation that a renter is not a taxpayer is invalid. The rent is buried in the rent. I mean, the taxes are buried in the rent, so, but I do think it needs to be a Seminole resident. I also, in that scan, we can reappoint people indefinitely. And so not only can they not be residents, but we could reappoint them indefinitely, which is also different from any other board that we have, and I'm not sure why what that thought process was. So I think there are 2 adjustments that we probably should be considering based on the public input. So I'm actually requesting that those changes be made.
Okay. Commissioner Delary, go ahead. Yeah.
Madam Chair, thank you. I was going to bring up the fact that I would agree that anyone that sits on this committee needs to be a Seminole County resident. I think that's a given. I understand the notion about having term limits, but their reappointment is that term limit. If you look at the Planning and Zoning, Board of Adjustments, they don't have those requirements yet.
So the way it reads, that's how I read it the first time I read it, and why I never brought this up before, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just did. So,
It's good to have dialogue, and I'm listening to
but
the
let's,
dialogue.
its members can also be reappointed indefinitely. I think you can continue to reappoint on our current boards. They come up every 2 years. There's a term, there's not a term limit, but this is different. This is written so that I can say, I am appointing so-and-so indefinitely.
I don't take it that way. I have no problem removing that, and they need to be reappointed.
Do we want an opinion from the, yeah.
First day.
Well, Commissioner, the way I read this, so the first sentence of that section 1 on line 112 reads, each member shall serve a 2-year term to run concurrently. And then I think the last sentence, members can also be reappointed indefinitely, means there's no term limits.
All right,
And
I'm
we
good
can
with that.
certainly reword that to make it clearer that there are no maximum number of terms.
If we can clarify it, that would be good. I'll also take ownership of the fact that I was listening while I was reading, even though it doesn't look like that to the audience, because I can do two things at one
Madam Chair, if I could
time.
ask the county attorney a question. I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you, but is there any issues with removing that last sentence where it says indefinitely? That would just make it a lot easier.
I don't think there would be an issue with that unless there's another restriction on the number of terms elsewhere.
I just think that we should remove the indefinite part from it, and it needs to say that you need to be a Seminole County resident.
Yeah, my suggestion to make that change is on line 103, where it reads, each commissioner will select one member. I think we can change the word member to be Seminole County resident. So each commissioner will select one Seminole County resident.
So if there's no objection, I think we should take the county attorney's recommendation. If there's no objection from this committee, the board, I would have no problem with that change here today.
Let's see what other input we have on that item. I
let
think
me know.
that's great. Commissioner Constantine.
Madam Chair.
Did I skip you? I'm
Nah,
so
go
sorry.
ahead, I'll take last.
Well, you just wanted to make the motion.
No, I got something to say.
Oh, okay. Well, if you've got something to say,
Go
say it.
ahead.
Go ahead and say something. Go ahead. You were first.
First of all, Commissioner Herr, was no insinuation whatsoever. I like to get things done
Bad
around
timing.
here. And quite frankly, we've been playing volleyball with this issue for way too long. We've spent 6% of our general revenue massaging this thing between staff time and people's time coming down here out of the audience. But the reality is, I have to make some statements on some comments that were written in some of the green things for those who wrote that we don't have green spaces or there's not enough green spaces. Just a quick calculation between what the county owns, what the state owns, what St. John's Water Management owns, between trails and natural land, state forest, and so forth, it's knocking on 30,000 acres. So this notion that we have very little to no open land in this county that's in conservation is simply just not true. And I understand maybe not everybody understands that, maybe not everybody's had the opportunity to go out there and enjoy those lands, but we do have quite a bit of land in this county that is in conservation and preservation. I, on the other hand, as far as I look at it from who sits on this board, a little different. I understand the desire to have a citizen of this county sit on it because it is their tax dollars, got it 100%. But the reality is, I, as a board member, would like the latitude to be able to pick the person most qualified in the area of expertise, and I don't know that we would find that in completeness within our own citizenry. Now, I think I could support the majority being Seminole County residents, but when it comes to, we've outlined some pretty detailed criteria of who should sit on this board, and I don't know that we have those expertise people willing to serve in every one of those categories. And if they are, is there going to be somebody to replace them at the end of that 2-year term or whenever they decide they no longer want to be or eligible to be involved? So I look at that a little bit different. I'm okay with maybe the majority, but I'd like to see us broaden our horizons for people that have maybe a higher expertise in the subject matter that we really owe it to our citizens to consider. My 2 cents.
Commissioner Constantine.
First of all, I want to thank everybody that's been coming here for well over a year in trying to put this and make it as good as we possibly can. I can't say anything more, and I'm not going to, other than I think that this is going to be a model for the rest of the states and rest of the counties in the state. Quite frankly, I've received a number of requests from at least 8 counties that are looking at this to just plug their name in and do this. So I think that once again, we're showing how we can be leaders. One of the things, as far as just to comment on what Mr. Zimbauer has said, Commissioner Zimbauer, is that we did put in there that there was a lot of different groups that can be ex officio or ad hoc, whichever is the non-voting representative. So there will be a lot of experts that will be able to sit at the table but just not have the votes. I never thought that it was, when reading this, like any other board that we have, that it wouldn't be Seminole County residents. And so I don't see that as a problem, because that was the interpretation that I had, that as all of our boards, you have to be a Seminole County resident. So all I would like to do, if I could have the privilege of making the motion in support of this.
I'd like to, before you do that, I have my things too. I was giving deference to all of the board members.
Okay, then let me just finish. But I do believe, I have no problem with taking the word indefinite out. I don't think it was, that is fine. Moving one of their duty as, to set up a 5-year plan. Obviously, we all know that it's going to be us that will make the final determination on that, and also that they have to be Seminole residents if that has to be specific. So with those 3 minor changes, I will do in support, and I would ask for the, if I could, the privilege of making the motion when we have the chance.
I too have concerns about the board members not being Seminole residents or having to be Seminole residents, so I'll throw my 2 cents on that. My concern, and with all of our boards that require expertise, including planning and zoning and board of adjustment and some very technical boards, we don't require that any of those board members have expertise in those areas. In fact, sometimes I think it makes it harder for people with expertise who serve on our boards to listen with open ears, because they already have a preconceived notion from their area of expertise. The process, as I recall from the last time that we went through this, was it was a citizen board. And we had, was it Pat that said that she had served? Pat Burkett served on the board in the past, I think. I think Commissioner Zimbauer, your assistant, served on that board as well.
She did.
And there is great value to a group of citizens serving on a committee, taking in information, learning together what the criteria are, and making decisions that they can then, without coercion's the only word that's coming to my mind, and I don't mean it to be coercion, but without pressure, to make a recommendation to this board, because that they are a recommending body, and any one of us could reach out to any expert that we would like to take input from in making our final decision. But I'm a little uncomfortable having our citizen board feel like they are, well, you're just the citizen on the board, but then we have these experts over here, and they're the ones that may have a greater voice. It concerns me a little bit. I'm thinking out loud because I want you to hear where I'm coming from, not because that's not my stake in the ground that I'm dying on. It's just a concern that I have. I'm so glad, Commissioner Zimbauer, you brought up all of the acreage that's already in conservation. And Mr. Durr, do you know offhand, Hillsborough County was mentioned with, there are 20 some odd properties, which is just wonderful. Hillsborough is a massive county. What percentage of our county's acreage is in conservation now?
Again, for the record, Richter, Leisure Services Director, and I'll have to, again, right off the top of my head, I think we're above the 30% mark, pushing 40, when you take certain water bodies into account as well. So there's a good portion of it.
It's significant. And I think we have all of that in conservation because generations of commissioners prior to us and citizens who had been here for many years saw the need. And so I I heard a couple of comments about, Seminole needs to get on board or Seminole needs to follow suit. I think we were the leaders back in the 90s and the 2000s, and this is our third iteration of a type of land conservation, land buying program. So I just wanted to make sure we got that on the record, that we are not new to the game in any way, shape, or form, that this just furthers the commitment. And I think it's also important to point out for anyone who has not read the ordinance, this is not just about natural lands in rural areas. This is about the opportunity to purchase passive recreation land in the urban area of this county where there is less and less of it. We talked earlier today about the importance of density and how we're going to have to increase density. Well, if we're going to do that, then this program gives us the opportunity to provide those urban passive recreation areas. So for those who are championing more conservation in the rural area, all of this is not going to conservation in the rural area, because that's frankly where we already have 30% of our county in preservation. I think you and your team, Mr. Durr, have done a phenomenal job. Gerlin from the county attorney's office has done a phenomenal job. And while I know there has been some heartburn about the length of time that it has taken us to get here, I want to say I think you've done this remarkably quickly. And you've tried to thread a needle with 5 different viewpoints. All very supportive, but different ideas and ways of how to get here, and you and your team have done a fantastic job, and I'm very proud of the time that you've been able to do this, considering all of the other things that have been going on in the world during this time. You've done a fantastic job, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, and that's...
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Delary, and then Commissioner Herr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you're correct. I know you're correct when you say that citizen input is extremely critical. In reading this, it says the board shall consider potential experts, potential. So you don't have to be an expert in biology, restoration, hydrology, forest, conservation. It's potential. And I think that's the caveat, but we definitely need as much citizen input as possible. And we'd be remiss, as you just said, this board and past boards have done a phenomenal job over the many years. I mean, you talk about the Yankee Lake property, that alone, that was done in the 80s, I believe. People still talk about that today, and that's where the scrub jays are. Then you talk about the landfill property that people don't realize it's a lot of land that's not even disturbed yet, and it's not going to be disturbed because we have it in preservation areas as well. So there's a lot of land that this county through decades has been protecting, and just recently we talked about not just Deer Run, but also Rolling Hills. So there's a lot of things that are happening all through. All this is doing, and I shouldn't say what it's just doing, it's setting a program up for the next generations as we move forward. And I think we're all very passionate about it. I think the citizens are very passionate about it. I think that when it comes to conservation and preservation, we all can't do enough. This is helping that. And we now have a program so we can actually leverage funds. As it was told by several people, the citizens that came in front of us today, when you're going after and competing dollars, they're going to look at first, is there a program that's established instead of just a will? Well, now we're showing not only a will, but a program. And I think you're correct, Madam Chair, by thanking our county employees, thanking all the people that have been patient with us. And unfortunately, government doesn't work that quick sometimes. So a year is pretty quick for some people and not quick enough for other people. But this is really a great program, and I think this ordinance does a phenomenal job on so many different levels. And I look forward to hearing Commissioner Constantine's motion. And I think that as we move forward, this will echo through the halls of so many other commission meetings in so many different counties that as we have been the leaders in so many different areas, this will also be one of the things that we as the citizens of all of Seminole County be very proud of as generations to come. So thank you, Madam Chairman, for me allowing me to say that.
Mr. Hart.
So I actually want to address your comment because I brought this up in briefing, and that is, this is line 104, which is, I think, a different section than where you were, Commissioner Delary, and that's that ARC may also consist of non-voting ex officio members from ages including but not limited to, and then we're listing 6, maybe 7, I'm counting them quickly. So the potential for the voting members to be outnumbered by the non-voting ex officio members is real, and the potential for pressure is real. I'm going to paraphrase what you told me in briefing to be clear, and then you're going to nod or not, but my understanding of this is that when the ARC is formed, they are going to finalize this, and those 7 voting members, will have input into how many of these organizations they want, and we will not be imposing that upon them. So if they want pressure, bring it on, and if they don't want pressure, they're not going to bring it on. Do I understand that correctly?
That's my takeaway as well.
So before we have a motion that's made, I'm going to let the county attorney weigh in with any last-minute suggestions or thoughts.
I need to clarify one issue, and I wanted to raise one more issue. A clarification, I think, is needed with regard to line 116. The sentence, members can also be appointed indefinitely without limits. I heard one commissioner say to delete that sentence altogether, and another commissioner said to remove just the word indefinitely. So I just needed that issue clarified.
I'd like to remove the sentence totally.
That's where I was.
I think that's cleaner. Is everyone okay with that? Removing the sentence completely?
Yeah, because it's got the other thing.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay, I hear consensus on that.
Yeah.
And the other issue I wanted to raise, I believe we have a consensus on changing the word member in line 103 to Seminole County resident. If that's the case, there are 2 other members that are nominated and voted on by the board. Did we also want those other 2 members to be Seminole County residents?
That is correct.
Yes.
Okay, we'll clarify that as well.
That's it? All right, great. Commissioner Herr.
I do have one final note that I just want to point out, and that is that we all spoke about the ability to change this as though that was an easy feat, and this requires a supermajority to change.
That's correct.
So this notion that, oh, but we can just, doesn't exist. And quite honestly, I'm in favor of the whole ordinance. Supermajorities absolutely do, they freak me out. It's not a good way to form a democracy, but I'm going to vote yes on this. I'll tell you that right now, but this cannot be a thing. I'm just going to say that out loud, and I realize that's probably not the greatest campaign speech ever. I see you glaring at me, but supermajorities, that is just a slippery slope. I think this is the only one we have.
No.
I think there might be others. We'll get back to you on that. Commissioner Zembauer.
I don't disagree. This notion has been floated numerous times about supermajority. I do not believe that is the democratic way to conduct business. Are you proposing a change, Commissioner?
I would prefer that it's a simple majority, but we've discussed that before.
Okay. All right.
Commissioner Constantine.
Thank you. It's kind of like the story that we saw with the Declaration of Independence, how, they talked it almost to death. As Mr. Baer said, this is not perfect. Nothing we do is, but I think this is very, very good. And we did do on other natural lands the change to put a supermajority, and that was the fact of the matter is that's where we were coming from on this one also. We have made the change or consensus on the Seminole residents and taking out the line and also putting the 5-year plan so everybody knew their responsibilities. And with those, I will make the motion to support and to approve Seminole Forever.
Second.
There's a motion by Commissioner Constantine, second by Commissioner Herr. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
as amended.
Yes, thank you. That was not in your motion, Commissioner Constantine?
Well, I
We need to
did.
have you
I did
as
say
amended?
those. Yes, I
You
did.
did?
I did.
Okay.
Those changes.
My apologies. We just want to make sure. We don't want to have to come back here again, remember?
Yes.
So there's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Appreciate you, Mr. Kerr. Are you good, Kyla?
Are you doing that?
Do you need anything else
I saw
from
you had a
us?
finger up, I'm just making sure. We're good? We do not want to come back again.
Madam Chair, can we take a 5-minute recess, please?
I thought they were going to be.
I can speak.
Yes.
Ms. Lori Bailey Brown talked to the citizen, and we are going to follow up with him tomorrow, so we've
Okay,
got that taken care of.
fantastic. Yes, then
Thank you, Lori.
let's take a break and come back at 3, let's be in our seats, ready to roll at 3:15.
Nobody cuts anybody slack.
Ladies and gentlemen, we need to reconvene our meeting, so if you're having some extracurricular conversations, I'd ask that you take it out to the lobby. We're going to reconvene our meeting. We've finished with our public hearing items, and we're going to move, because we already did our county manager and county attorney reports this morning, we'll move right into district commissioner reports, starting with District 3.
Thank you very much. Briefly, I just wanted to congratulate everybody involved on the county amenity that we have in the 100-year Sanford Ritz Theater. Commissioner Herr and I attended this past week, and I just want to say they went through the whole years and years of history of that particular beautiful theater, and it was just so nice to see, and I just wanted to congratulate everybody involved, because it is quite an inspiration. And other than that, I am, as far as the future agenda items that I saw that Commissioner Herr brought up, I just wanted to mention that I think that that's a wonderful idea, and airborne pollutants should also include pesticides. And that's all.
We can certainly talk about that during the future agenda item. District 5, Commissioner Herr.
Yes, Commissioners, I shared with you via email two what I thought were critical links updates just for your information. One is the update on the paratransit services transition, which has gone exceptionally well. On-time services have increased to prior to transition numbers, and it is going exceptionally well. And then there was also an update on the zero-emission vehicles additions to the fleet, which they've been very consistent and deliberate about executing upon. I did attend the 100-year celebration, so congratulations to the past and current boards of the Ritz that held that together with sheer determination. And I'll also point out a little part of the history there is that right after it reopened in 2020, there's a certain judicial investiture that was held there that is very near and dear to my heart. And so it's always fun to sit in that audience and remember that day. I did also have the privilege of serving our team by assisting in the groundbreaking for the Habitat for Humanity community. This is the first time in Seminole County that they've developed multiple houses at once. It is in Goldsboro. It's 6 homes. This is through our ARPA funding, so it's the rotating loan that will happen, and we got to meet one of the homeowners, the future homeowners, and she is actually a employee of the healthcare delivery system, so it's wonderful. She's been employed for 7 or 8 years, and this will give her a leg up and a hand up that will be remarkable. On Sunday, Mark and I, my husband, Judge Her, I don't know what to call him up here. We don't do things together often, and so that was awkward, and I'm going to own that, and I hope he's not watching. He doesn't often watch. We attended the Midway Safe Harbor. At the Midway Safe Harbor, there was an event held by Mark Robinson and Stephanie Smith, and I was congratulated many times for getting Mr. Her out to this event, because he, by the judicial canons, can't do a lot of things. It was not me that got him out there. Let me be clear. It was Stephanie Smith who got him out there. He has committed to doing it again next year, but it was a backpack giveaway. And these are just 2 community members, sister and brother, that hosted this event, pulled together volunteers, pulled together sponsors, and handed out about 200 backpacks. It was a really good event. And then I also want to point out that yesterday, Lynx does a deal every year where they allow nonprofits to advertise on a bus. And they pick certain nonprofits, and they all go on the side of the bus. And we had 2 there. The one that I'll point out was Christian Tech Center Ministries, and this is Andre Klass. And he and his mom were there. They were ecstatic. And he gave me an update on their progress. They have given away 500 computers since he opened the doors there. Most of them in town. Lynx has adopted them as a place to give computers away to once they're out of circulation. I've asked for that to happen at the county. I think that is also happening. If there are any other organizations listening to this, he has really stepped up and is doing great work for the community. And I'll point out that the Economic Partnership was awarded the 2023 Chamber of the Year for the country. It's a lot. Congratulations. And I'm through.
District 1. Commissioner Delary, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had an individual that's no longer on our Code Enforcement Board. Her name is Jane Hames, and I'd like to make a motion for a resolution of appreciation for her service on that board.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Jane is wonderful. They're going to miss her on that board. Does that appointment come back to you, or is that a rotating appointment?
It'll be coming back to me, and I'll be doing that soon.
I picked somebody good, because she was great.
I tend to. And so then I also want to give you a quick update on Brumley Road. I know staff has been working very hard on that. Remember, I gave you an update on that last month in reference to the fatality that happened there. Staff has done some improvements, not just reflectors, signage, and have also put down thermoplastic tape to act as some rumble strips, and it's actually, as well as law enforcement has been out there quite a bit, and the traffic and the people in after evenings have calmed down quite a bit. And we did have a meeting there on June the 28th. I'm sorry, July 28th. And very few, no residents were there, so that tells me that everyone seems to be happy at this point.
Very good.
Also want to give you a quick update on Sunrail. Our staff with Paul Chipok and John Dredge have been working very hard on that regarding the transition plan. They'll be updating us within the next couple of months because of that, and I want to make sure that it's on everyone's radar so that we can all be brought up to speed, so that when I do bring this to you all, that we can give me instructions on how we're going to be working. We at some point will need to provide additional funds for an attorney that represents the entire Sunrail board for that transition. And I've spoken to Mr. Gray about that, and that'll be either a mid-year adjustment or next year's budget. I don't know what, but we'll talk about that at the appropriate time. And last, I want to thank everyone for their well wishes and their prayers and their support for my dad, and just want to say thank you. End of my report.
Commissioner Zembauer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, a couple things in my district. As you know, I was actually traveling, spent some quality time with my grandchildren, but there still was some excitement in my district. We had the boat accident on Mullet Lake where the two boats collided. Unfortunately, even though there was a young lady ejected, I want to thank the fire and rescue personnel for responding, and there was no critical injuries, thank goodness. So we appreciate that. Also, I'd like to send a thank you out to the Winter Springs Police Department, who unfortunately had to respond to a report of some foul odors in a residence to only find 3 dogs that had been left behind. One was deceased. 2 were in very, very poor condition. That individual has since been identified and arrested by the Winter Springs Police Department. And I would say there's a special place in hell for people like that who decide to abuse animals, especially when it would have been as simple as to pick up the phone and make a call to somebody or drop them at our animal shelter. So that's most unfortunate. I want to also remind everybody that back to school starts on Thursday, August 10th, and be aware of the children that'll be out, you know, that aren't always aware where you're at, and it's onerous upon us as motorists and adults to look out for the little ones in our community. And you know, sometimes they get carried away and don't pay attention and run out in front of vehicles or not sure where they're standing. So we urge you to be have some heightened attentiveness to, you know, your driving during these times. Also want to congratulate the Altamont Springs Babe Ruth 10-year-old team who is going to the World Series. They just finished in Indianapolis, got some more games coming up, so we wish them all the best. And I'm sorry for reporting that. I figured you already knew that, but I know it because my family's business is there, of course. Also, I would ask, there has been a public information release from the City of Winter Springs on a watershed cleanup, and I would like if staff could review this document and give me some advice. I have some residents that are concerned that they're not part of this, although they're within the City of Winter Springs. If there's some kind of program that we can possibly either point them in the right direction, help them with. The release from the city basically is talking about the Natural Resources Conservation Grant of 75%, and the city's picking up the remainder of 25%. But I've come to understand, at least the perception is from some of the residents, that does not include all the residents on that waterway, that there are some HOAs that at some time in history, the city didn't have easements or right-of-way access to those areas, and I don't know that the county can do anything, but I'd like to give answers to some of my constituents in the city of, is there anything that we can do or point the city in direction to help these individuals? I don't know how it makes sense to clean 300 foot on this end of the creek and 80 foot on that end of the creek with 2,000 feet in between that's not being cleaned. I'm not sure I track that, but anyway, if I could get some assistance on that, I'd very much appreciate it. Outside of that...
Can you stop right there for a moment?
Sure.
I'm not asking for dialogue, but I know that we use a lot of the creeks for water conveyance, and I'd like to know how that will affect the water conveyance, not just in Seminole, but in Winter Springs, if it's not working correctly. Sorry.
Yeah. So, and thank you very much for that. Engineering, they've given me some information on these water bodies, but it just doesn't make sense to me that where the county's doing everything on each side of it, and the city's doing some of it, but not all of it, and the people in between are caught in the middle. So I don't know the answer. The answer at the end of the day may be there's nothing we can do, and it's on them and the city to figure out. But if we can, I'd appreciate that very much. Outside of that, I want to say thank you to everybody in the community who showed up today on this long considered ordinance, and my fellow commissioners for considering it and having the patience with all of us to work our way through it. So outside of that, everything is perfect in District 2.
Perfect.
Just don't be on a boat or be a dog. You're good.
That's right.
Still want to welcome again Kate and Chris. We're really glad to have you. I know you've already officially been welcomed earlier today, but I think on behalf of the board, I will just say how thrilled we are to have both of you here, and we've got a long list of things for both of you to jump in on. So want to wish Matt Kinley, Chief Kinley, a happy birthday before we come back together again. I don't have a note here of how many years he's turning, but happy birthday to Chief Kinley. A couple of weeks ago, I took a field trip, trying to use Sunrail for my mode of transportation. Most of my meetings on a particular day were all along the spine of Sunrail, and so I really tried very hard to make that work. I knew I was going to have to take some Ubers, but I didn't realize that the gap in time for one of the trains, if you don't make that 9:20 train at Church Street, there's not another one until 11:20. So I was Ubering a lot more than I had planned. But it was a really good exercise for me because I learned a lot. And after that, and I chronicled some of it on Facebook just for kicks because I thought it was going to be kind of fun. Here, instead of it being, hey, this was a great experience, it was, oh my gosh, I missed my train picture. And, I got a chance to talk to Secretary Tyler afterward because there were some operational things that I noticed that didn't quite jive with what we thought we were supposed to be getting in terms of counting people, and it just seemed, it wasn't what I had pictured. So I'm glad I did it because what I experienced was not what I thought was happening. And that's prompted some good conversation. But I think it will also be helpful when we start talking further, and Commissioner Delary as our representative on the Commuter Rail Commission. If any of you have not done it, and really tried to, it's worth trying to do, like not just going down for one meeting and coming back, but really trying to get on and off. And it was an experience, and it was valuable. So staff was incredibly helpful and friendly. The trains were incredibly clean, and I felt very safe traveling by myself, all day long. There were some good things, but there's a lot of opportunity. So went down to the Orlando Economic Partnership for my board member orientation. I've been on the board now almost 6 months and just managed to get orientation done. There were several. Michelle Mikesh was another person in the orientation, along with the dean of the School of Business at Stetson University. And so we had quite a small group, but it was very good because we had an opportunity to dialogue and ask some questions. And the award, the Chamber of the Year award, was also something they were very proud of, and even brought the award for us to see and touch and feel that was real. There will be some interesting changes coming from that organization moving forward that I will fill you all in on. They're starting a kind of a new enterprise, if you will, and my question at the end of the day was, are you going to be asking us for more money because of this? And the answer I got was no, but we need to keep an eye on that because I want to better understand what's happening there, and we'll definitely keep you all updated as that moves forward. Darren and I will be attending Mayors and Managers on the 15th together, and then, and Good Morning Seminole this last week was the featured entity with Seminole State College, and all of the different ways that organization impacts this community. And the format, I don't know who came up with it, but it was a tremendous format. People at the different tables around the room had the opportunity to stand up and be a part of the presentation and speak to the different programs that the college offers and how they integrate. So it wasn't just the same person who you would expect standing up saying how great the college is. They were trusted voices, literally placed around the room. It was a fantastic format. It was very engaging, and as they say, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So for future programs that we might want to do, I would highly recommend talking to the chamber about how they coordinated that. It was very, very well done. And that is all that I have. The county attorney would like to add one item before we go to the future agenda items.
Yeah, I apologize. This issue was brought to my attention during the recess today, and Mr. Chipak is going to do a quick update.
Yes, thank you. For the record, Paul Chipak, Deputy County Attorney. In litigation, things are very time sensitive, and we have one item come up where there was a foreclosure sale in mortgage foreclosure case of Wilmington Savings Fund Society, FSB versus Danny Allen et al. In that situation, the property was sold, and the county has 2 code enforcement board liens. As a result of the excess money from the sale of that property, there was $4,000 left. We've received a settlement offer from the other heirs of the property, which basically requests that we split the $4,000 with them, so we would be getting $2,000 and the heirs would be getting $2,000. The total code enforcement board lien was for $4,000. The contingency on this is that the IRS, who also had a lien, withdraw their any claim to the settlement offer. So given those set of circumstances, again, we have to bring a settlement offer to you in this case, and our recommendation is that we accept the settlement offer and that you authorize Deputy County Attorney Lynn Porter Carlton to prepare and submit the appropriate documents to the court to obtain disbursement of the surplus funds from the court registry in accordance with the proposed settlement.
Madam Chair, move to approve.
Second.
So one of the items that I neglected to bring up under my chairman's report is our revisions to our operating policies and procedures, because we never follow them. So, are there any questions for Mr. Chipak? All right, is there a motion?
I made the motion.
Commissioner Zembauer makes a motion, and who would like to second the motion?
Sure.
Commissioner Herr, there's a motion and a second. I'm just following what everybody voted to put in place. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We actually have in that policies and procedures that there's an actual process for being recognized before you make a motion and the whole thing, but we just kind of, and if we can change it, but I'm just trying to do it.
I think we should. I think we need to revisit that.
Thought we asked the county manager.
In the interest,
No, we've all been asked to submit edits.
in the interest of efficiency.
I think we need to have the
And there's
ability.
no allegations behind that statement, just saying.
For the purpose of the board meeting running smoothly and the clerk being able to identify who's making motions, it really is appropriate, at least from a Robert's Rules perspective, at least, for the chair, whoever's chairing, to identify the motioner and the seconder so that it can be well documented. And I love the efficiency, but it does make it a little more difficult. Anything else from the county attorney's office? Okay. Future agenda item.
I'll go to future agenda item, but were you going to bring up so I did submit, I completely redlined the policy to get to some efficiency, I didn't change that. However, I have been asking for, since the day I arrived, a system here where we don't all have to do this. And in the beginning, I was having to do this. Push the button and you get recognized and it pops up on your screen in the order of it. Doesn't cost that much money. The other entities have it. We just need to get this up to speed and then that goes away.
100%. Agreed.
And I could report on that, and yes, we started working on that. You'll be happy to know that I'll be coming by each of your offices and showing you the updated system that we have vetted out, and I'm just going to meet with you all individually. There was a few changes that we'd like to make to the chambers, as well changing the carpet that hasn't been changed in 50 years, it seems like, as well. So there's a few other things. So we've already identified budget for that as well, and put that in, so you'll be seeing that in the next couple weeks.
Is that going to be like a Family Feud button? We're all trying to get to it?
It's all touch screen.
Could be.
Touch screen, it's right here.
All right.
And then everyone, you in the queue know the order, you
Right.
know how it's actually quite
Right.
wonderful.
What happens if you don't have a monitor?
You're going to have a monitor.
I will not have
So,
a monitor.
well, part of our inability to get efficient, quite honestly, is the fact that the county manager has to go to all 5 of our offices to ask
Right.
if we're willing to upgrade. This isn't a kingdom. We have no kings or princesses or princes or queens, whatever we want to be called. We need to cooperate as 5. And so for us to be able to say, well, I refuse to do that and I refuse to do that, that's not how the world works. So I would implore everybody to cooperate to try to see if we can make this work. Should I do future agenda items?
Yes.
So I will tell you that I think the question that came up about water was an amazing learning experience for us in terms of going back and digging history and all of that good stuff. I think that we had a really good position in terms of the things that we had done and the steps that we had taken. I think that we took the opportunity to create improvements for future, all of that with regard to that. But the things that we didn't do were take the deeper dive into the root cause. And that happened in the 70s, and we can't go back. But we have stuff happening right now that we can't fix. And so I'll give an example. We have, in my district, we have somebody that's using a piece of property to all of the sudden, right behind where people live, crush rocks and crush cement. And we have this due process, which I did air quotes, so I take them back. I take them back. But we're following the due process, and in the meantime, the resident is breathing the dust. And so how do we get ourselves a full review of our codes and provisions to the point where, and I'm not saying we should ever shortcut due process, but at some point we ought to be able to shut something down. And in this instance, we can't. We said, somebody went and said, well, put a little sprinkler head on the rock pile, which may or may not be on all day long, and then that will solve the problem. And the citizens have been amazingly gracious, but this was never intended to be a rock-crushing pile in the back of a neighborhood, yet we are powerless, and we ought not to be. So when the water situation came up, it occurred to me that, if we had caught them, if this was happening today, and we were driving down I-4, and we saw little guys out in the back of the Stromberg-Carlson plant dumping crates of stuff, dumping jugs of junk into the ground, could we have stopped it? I don't know, and I don't want to not know.
Right.
So that was the take on this. I think, Commissioner Constantine, this was never intended to be specific to a pesticide, et cetera. I would consider that a toxin. This was a request for a broader look at what can we do when we feel there's a violation. I would ask you, I'm not sure I'm going to get the name of the city right, but I think it's Reedley. It is a small city that has recently been faced with a lab that was working in their municipality that had a garden hose coming out of the wall and into the ground, and they had to fight this on their own. And it was a code enforcement officer that shut down this horrific situation. Could we be that code enforcement officer? I'm not sure we could. I don't feel confident that we could.
Commissioner Sandbauer is asked to be recognized. Are you? Okay.
I appreciate the clarification because I had some concerns when I saw the way this was titled on future agenda items. My fear was that we were going to be reinventing another government layer of EPA and DEP that already existed, so I appreciate that. And to your point, I have fought this with residents in my district, and several things that unfortunately I have a keen awareness in the automotive and trucking business is there are a great deal of people operating, quote, automotive repair, motorcycle repair, boat repair in their homes with zero oversight from the fire marshal, zero oversight from DEP. As a business, we get a visit from the fire department to make sure we're in compliance. And when I've raised this issue with code enforcement, or my residents have raised and then brought it to my attention, nothing's happening. I'm told we have no power to do anything because home-based businesses are allowed. We are not allowed to regulate them. We are not allowed to inspect. We're not allowed to do anything, and I find that just shocking. So at the end of the day, if that is truly the case, then I think it's going to take state action to move that bar. And this is one of the topics that the county attorney and I will be discussing when we get together, because this has been an ongoing issue for 3 or 4 years now of these type complaints, and we can't regulate this and we can't take action on this. And I know from that activity what chemicals are being utilized in the process of repairing somebody's car that are going unregulated and probably dumping right in the ground and going to our landfill, not being properly recycled. And so, you know, it is a problem. So I would support, to your point, a broader understanding or view. What authority do we have, if any? Does that fall with code enforcement, the fire marshal, the health department? Who is it, and what is it we're capable of doing? I can tell you, personal experience, having businesses in 2 counties, that Orange County is much more restrictive and proactive than Seminole County is on even businesses being in compliance. What that means, I can't tell you other than operating businesses in both counties. That's been my experience, for what it's worth.
Well,
So I would support that.
Yeah, I will definitely, now that I better understand it, I will definitely support it as well. And I think that there is an even bigger issue that we're talking about here, and it is code enforcement. Patty and I were just talking at lunch today about we have issues. One issue has been going on for 10 years, and some of it, when it does get to the code board, because of our appointees, they give them more time, they give them more leniency. We need to, put the bleeding hearts on the animal board and put some sharks on code enforcement. We really need to look at the whole picture. How do we make sure that we can keep those things from happening or nip them in the bud sooner? And that all falls into the code enforcement issue. We've got code enforcement in our building division. We've got code enforcement in planning, the dredge and fill people, the ones that do dredge and fill. I'm sorry.
Environmental services?
No.
Watershed?
Development services. I think they do that. I mean, it is so spread out by issue, by topic of expertise, which would make sense in some ways, but then you've got the sheriff's office, and Lee, as soon as I'm done talking, I promise I'll recognize you.
Just keep my hand.
Then you've got the sheriff's office that we rely on for other things,
Right.
and it doesn't make for a cohesive, timely response to issues. So totally on board. Commissioner Constantine.
I was just trying to abide by the regulations. With the 2 sets of eyes, new sets of eyes here, and despite the fact that she probably has nothing else to do in catching up, I think this would be a great opportunity to have them look at these new, because you are absolutely right. One of the things that is so frustrating is, citizens calling, code enforcement problems, and there's very little we can do. And it's hard to tell a citizen we can't do anything. Now, sometimes it's just one neighbor not liking another neighbor. We all know that too. But it would be nice to know if we could do some definitive work. And if I can, just have one other second, and a moment of great pride to our county since it's baseball season, and Commissioner Zimbauer brought up the 10-year-olds in Altamont. I think tomorrow, the Little League of Lake Mary is playing in the finals of the Southeast Regional, and if they win, they're in the winner's bracket, but I think there's just one game. If they win, the 10 to 12-year-olds, they go to Pennsylvania for the championships, the Little League World Series. And also, I believe that some young man that went to school either at Lake Mary or Lyman just got drafted #1 in the baseball major leagues and was player of the year from LSU. Fortunately, he didn't go to a Florida school, but he still became #1 player in the draft. I just thought, for Seminole County, and on a good note.
And so supportive of the future agenda item. And Commissioner Delary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support the future agenda item. I just would like to ask Commissioner Herr a quick question. The property that is doing this crushing of concrete, is it an industrial area?
You know what, I don't know off the top of my head. It was land originally owned by a developer that was slated to be developed at some point that is not being used for development. So I don't know what I don't remember off the top of my head what it is.
I think, part of this is going to have to do with land use, property rights, and future land use, and I'm glad that we'll be having a work session or more discussion on that.
Yeah, we've identified that it shouldn't be happening, if that helps you. It shouldn't be happening. We just have to go tell them it shouldn't be happening, then they stop for a day, and it's that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You just can't shut it down.
I misunderstood that.
We've identified that it shouldn't be happening.
Okay, that's a different story in my mind.
Commissioner Zimbauer.
Thank you.
Not to beat a dead horse or mule, code enforcement needs a deep dive. That's the bottom line. I mean, it's not just these type of issues we've just discussed. It's bigger and broader issues, which is, I think what was just stated here is, it's identified, correction, there's sometimes no follow-up, and they're right back doing the same thing again. And of course, supposedly are driven by citizen complaints only. We're not proactive in enforcement. That may be a topic for discussion, but we also don't accept any complaints whatsoever unless a name is given of who's complaining. And so many times residents just won't complain, or they'll call one of our offices and go, hey, and what we tell them is, we got to give a name. So, well, never mind, I don't want to talk about it, So it needs just a good deep dive.
And I do know that state statute was put in place in order to keep neighbors from being retaliatory,
right.
or coming up with things. But I have gotten to the place with some situations where I have called it in myself and said, put my name down.
Right.
Because the neighbors were so worried. It was a legitimate issue, but the neighbors were so worried that the neighbor would be ugly that all right, make it me. You got to have a name.
And to that point, I own a piece of property in Palm Beach. You can't park a car on your front lawn. Within an hour, there's a violation of code enforcement. I mean, it's that quick. Nobody's called. They're just driving around finding violations. It's insane, but.
So it sounds to me like there's consensus to move Commissioner Herr's future agenda item forward.
I got it.
All right. Ms. Coons, do we have anyone who has indicated that they would like to make public comment not related to an agenda item today?
Just the one of the written comment.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and read this because I think it's appropriate rather than just pass it down. This citizen, I believe, was here earlier and has left. The comment is, please lower the speed limit on West Airport Boulevard. It is residential, and there is no reason for it to be 35 miles per hour. People fly down it, and I have already had 2 of my dogs killed by speeding drivers. So that's an opportunity, too, for the sheriff's office to do some enforcement in the meantime, but that's the...
And it sounds like animal control if the dogs are getting into the street.
Well, I mean, my dog gets out, too. That happens. Still don't want him to get hit.
Oh, no, none of us do.
Any other members of the public who are here who would like to speak, who neglected to fill out a form? We certainly want to hear from you if you've taken the time to be here. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? Anything from the county manager or the county attorney?
No, ma'am.
All right. We are adjourned at 3:55.
Fantastic.